Welcome to today's Horror Ghost Stories. My weird 4-day experiences. I am not sure how to really type this up, so bear with me. It was a weird 4 days before Halloween of this year, 2025. You can call me Sibby for these stories. On October 24th, my husband, who we will call Doug, and I were heading home from our night shift. We worked together in the KC area of Missouri. We got off around 11 p.m. like most normal nights. We had a long drive ahead of us because we live in the middle of nowhere on a country road. Doug was driving this night because I was having a horrible headache. We were on 50Y and I was watching the clear sky for at least 20 minutes. This was until we got to the country road we turn off on. I was watching the opossums and occasionally raccoons on the side of the road at this point. We have 2 very sharp turns in the road that you shouldn't go 5 mph on. My heart is racing thinking about this incident. My husband slowed way down and my eye caught something looking back at me.
I thought it was a deer at first, but whenever we got closer, I realized I was not looking at a deer.
It was a man squatting with his knees up to his shoulders, smiling at me.
I froze while not breaking eye contact.
By the time we fully lost him, I had a horrible panic attack. It felt like we were making eye contact for several minutes.
Though I know it was only a few seconds.
My husband asked me to calm down and try to explain what I saw. At this point, all I could get out was "man" and "go faster." Before I continue going, I would like to add that I have 15 hours of essay from my childhood. So if it was just a man, that would have terrified me regardless. My husband hit on the gas and we went much faster. I was finally able to calm down after a few minutes. That was until we were 5 minutes from home. There were 4 or 5 deer lined up on a fence like children waiting in line for recess, staring at the road. The last deer is what scared the heck out of me. It was standing in such an unnatural way. If that deer bent its chin towards its body, it would have been resting on its shoulders. I lost it at this point, and when we got home, I ran inside, locking the doors behind my husband. Everything was fine until Monday of Halloween week. We went about our day just fine. I refused to go down the road where everyone happened that night. So my husband went through a tiny town and went a back road. We were okay, and I was still terrified to look out my window. While I was scrolling through my phone in the passenger seat, I felt like something was watching me. I looked up at the road, and at that very second, a giant owl or hawk swooped down at my side of the car and went back up.
All I saw was white and I screamed.
My husband jerked the car but was able to get control again. We both tried laughing it off, and my husband said something along the lines of aerial attacks to lighten the mood. We were laughing and joking around at this point. We were about a mile from home when we saw a deer and cat having a standoff. This deer was standing there looking at this cat, sitting down and calm, like they were having a conversation. My husband and I love wildlife, so he turned our car to see what was happening, coming to a stop. This deer turned its head at impossible speed and stared at our car. If the head wasn't a part of it, I think it would have flown right off like those cheesy horror movies when someone gets decapitated. It just stared at us, which felt like forever. Then before we knew it, the deer leaned towards the cat just a little bit and zoomed off into the woods. The next night was more terrifying than the last one. We were in the same spot where we saw the deer and cat having a standoff about home.
A huge buck came out of the darkness.
My husband stopped not wanting to hit it. Bear with me on this next part because it happened so fast. This deer froze like a statue and didn't move.
I felt fear all of a sudden and yelled at my husband to go and go now. He hit on the gas, and right as I yelled this, Buck looked straight at our car and charged at us, horns down and everything.
Then when I looked back, it was nowhere in sight. Like it didn't happen.
Everything stopped after that night for the most part.
I am actually at work, typing this on break, not ready for the drive home. I refused to go on the road where I saw that man still there next story. The pig below the window. This story is quite short, but it scarred me for life. So bear with me. We'll call my sister T for the sake of privacy.
I was around 10-12, I'm unsure of the age as the night was a little blurry.
I was in my sister's room, hanging out with her as I usually did every few nights. Now we didn't have a set bedtime, so I was prepared to stay awake all night. My time in her room was easygoing, as it always was. Yeah, we'd share our occasional arguments, but other than that, I'd look forward to my visits. Just like any other night, I expected this one to be the same as all the other visits. T was sitting in her chair, doing her nightly routine. It wasn't much, just consisted of taking her makeup off and such, the usual girl stuff. While she was doing that, I was standing up, sort of near her chair on my phone. Nothing much occurred for those few hours we were hanging out. Our parents were still awake, as they usually stayed up a little late. Of course not anymore. Time has passed since then. It wasn't until T got up to head to the bathroom. I was still standing, captivated by my phone, so I didn't really notice her absence.
A few minutes went by and I heard faint oinking.
Mind you, we live in town and any livestock isn't allowed within city limits. But as a young kid, I wasn't aware of the law, and I was curious about the sound I was hearing outside. T's room had a big window with curtains. I approached the window and pulled the curtains over my head. It was night, and her light was on, so I cupped my hands and pressed my forehead against the window to get the best view of our backyard.
I saw nothing until my eyes darted down to the ground just below the window.
From what I saw, it appeared to be a small pig. It was pink and I heard oinking. From the moment I saw it, it felt like I was immediately put into a trance. The world around me didn't exist. My only focus was that pig on the ground, with an occasional oink leaving its mouth. It was only minutes staring at it, but it felt like an eternity. Now I've heard other stories saying they were put in a trance and had the urge to leave the safety of their home to see what was there. And I now know what that felt like. My eyes never left that pig. All the while my body was urging me to leave T's room and go outside to our backyard and grab that baby pig. The moment I decided that was going to leave that room and head outside, it was like whatever that thing was sensed my soon arrival.
And in an instant, whatever that thing was darted under our house in under a nanosecond.
It moved so unnaturally fast, my body barely had time to process it. The only reason I was brought back to my senses was the squeal it let out as it ran. Now it wasn't a regular pig squeal. It was as if something was making an attempt to sound like one, but was unsure of how an actual pig squeal sounded. When I heard that unnatural scream, I threw myself away from that window, and I immediately broke down in tears. T came rushing into her room asking what's wrong and what happened. I could barely conjure words. Around 5 minutes later, I told her what had happened, and we told our parents. I'm not sure if they entirely believed me, but my dad went outside with a bat, and to no avail, he did not find anything. Since that night, I never dared to look out of any windows when it was nighttime, as I'm too afraid to encounter what I saw that unfaithful night. Next story, I hope it wasn't her. My name is Kay, and I want to share a story that happened in 2013, which I vividly remember. I am not sure if this will make it into the podcast, but if it does, I hope anyone listening believes this story because it did happen to me. For starters, I'll give you a layout of the town I was born in, where everyone knew each other and all the houses were really close together. There was a long stretch of road that led up the street and down the street. Back then, my town had neither mobile phones nor vehicles. It was a very rural town where all the kids would play outside and gather together to play tag and other things. The older people told us many tales, such as El Cadejo, El Jinete Sin Cabeza, the headless man, La Carreta Chillona, the creaking cart, and many others. But one that mainly stuck with me was La Ciguanaba, which is an urban legend from El Salvador. Many people know her and many of us fear her. There have been sightings of her around Central America. For context, La Ciguanaba was a beautiful woman who married a soldier and had a child. With this said soldier was found in bed by the wife with another woman. The wife was furious and lashed out at her husband and killing both him and his mistress. Later on, she abandoned her child in a banana plantation where his lifeless body was found. After they found the victim's body, they found hers, and she became a restless spirit who hunts the streets of El Salvador, hunting drunk men and cheaters. Well, let me tell you my story now, which has been shared. One afternoon, I went to visit my aunt who lived down the street of our home, around 6 or 7 houses down the street. She and I were close, almost like sisters. She had left home due to my grandmother's strict behavior and abuse. I lived with my grandma due to my parents being in the US. My aunt's house was a very beautiful home surrounded by trees. Her home was built like an L shape, where in the middle she had this big tree, which I believe is called saber tree. You can look it up. It's quite big. I was always somewhat afraid of that tree due to how big it was. That afternoon, left early around 1, and my grandma had told me to return before sundown due to all the violence that was happening in El Salvador at the time. Well, of course, I had lost track of time by the time I realized the sun had already was setting down behind the hills. I knew my grandma was going to be extremely upset if I didn't go home. I was on my way to say goodbye to my aunt when I heard my name being called.
My name is a very unique name, and not everyone knew or knows how to pronounce it, so I was caught off guard thinking it was my aunt.
I ignored it and went looking for my aunt. Once I found her, I asked her if she had called my name, and she gave me a weird look and told me she in fact hadn't called my name. I explained to her how I had lost track of time and that I should head home. She told me to spend the night since it was pretty dark. By then I told her I couldn't because of Grandma. My aunt reassured me. It would be fine, she would explain to my grandma the next day, but I insisted, so she finally gave up and she told me to wait for her. She was going to look for a flashlight so I could walk back home. Once she had gone back inside, I went to walk to the front of this house, looked at the tree, thinking about how much trouble I was in when I heard my name being called. So, of course, I thought it was my aunt. I replied with a yes, but there was no reply back then.
Again, I heard my name being called for the second time.
I looked around, but nobody was around until I looked at the tree, and there she was, a woman peeping her head out behind the tree, smiling with her long black hair covering her pale skin. I stared at her, frozen in fear, before I took off running to look for my aunt. I bumped into her husband, and he asked me what was wrong, and I explained to him how I had seen someone behind the big tree. He reassured me it was nothing, and I imagined it. I told him I didn't imagine it and that I saw a woman behind the tree. He then grabbed his flashlight and told me he was going to take a look. I followed him but stayed within close reach of the door, just in case as he went to check behind the tree. Once he was near it, he said there was no one there, and that there was a possibility, I imagined it out of fear, to walk back home in the dark by myself. Maybe that was the case, but I remember the woman's creepy smile and long black hair. After that encounter, my aunt and her husband decided to walk me back home.
Not long after, though, when I visited their home again, that tree had been cut down.
My aunt said it was because it was too dangerous to have such a big tree near the house due to storms, but I don't believe it. I'm sure they both saw something. Next story, a surprise underneath the sofa. I grew up as a weird kid who was obsessed by werewolves at the age of 6, tried to conjure aliens to appear above my home at age of 9, and who pondered the possibilities of parallel universes at the age of 12, long before the internet existed, and the only way to get information was to find a way to a library and read. Of course, the next natural step on this trajectory was to get into divination. I made my first runes at the age of 16 from a thin alder branch, just thick enough for me to be able to get round, flat runes out of them, and draw on a marker each rune symbol carefully on a piece of paper, and then glued them on the alder pieces. Since my first runes, I have gotten into oracle cards, tarot and divination by amulets, postcards, even coins.
I earned partially my living with divination orders when I was studying, and I'm still a part-time oracle.
For the lack of a better word, because I don't feel that a medium or a psychic really fits me as a description. However you want to label me, I can say that I'm used to all kinds of weird occurrences happening and know the gimmicks of the spirit world inside out, from poltergeists to possessions and from past lives to astral traveling. But this one event in my life took even me by surprise. My apartment is a small studio apartment, enough to fit in a bed, a sofa and a living room table, which all together take up half of the living space. My bed is positioned to the right-hand side from the sofa and the living room table. My sofa and the table work as my working space for all my needs. I write get letters and postcards ready, Eat, draw, design, sort items, organize my sticker collection. Study, talk with online friends, plan and do all work tasks, including those times when I'm filling my clients' divination orders. Pretty much everything that happens in my life outside sleeping happens on this spot. The divination process itself is simple. I introduce the client to the spiritual world, tell what they want to know, and then shuffle decks until the reading is done. Unlike many readers, my way of working with the decks is what I call a freestyle. I shuffle and let the cards fly out from the deck on their own. Because of this method, sometimes some rogue cards fly out and go hiding underneath the table or the sofa without me noticing them. I usually spot them the next day, the latest, albeit sometimes a week has passed when I have found a lonely card hiding on the floor. If there are multiple rogue cards, they're always scattered haphazardly here and there. Sideways, upside down, turned up, turned, facing down the floor, on top of each other, and so on. I had a really busy day this particular day when the incident happened. It was mid-July 2024. I had been working with client orders for hours because I had a special July sale on my online store and reading orders were pouring in. I had been using almost all of my decks to answer various questions and to give assistance to people when they wanted to know something about themselves or what decision would be the best one in their case. One client particularly had a question about their love life, the most popular question of all the time. So for this client's case, I used an oracle card deck specifically meant for love-related inquiries. It is a pink deck with romantic paintings of couples, often accompanied with cherubs. And underneath every painting is a word for the card and a short description for the card's topic, such as passion, allow your heart and soul to sing with joy. This particular deck was a new one in my ever-growing deck collection. I had gotten it as a Christmas present from my sister last year, so I had not used it much yet. It was a little wild one, often making cards fly all over the place while shuffling, throwing the cards around with such force that I had to pick up cards meant for a client's reading off from the floor. Trust me, when I say that every single deck has a personality of its own, and they don't always come along with you or are in a mood for work. Ask this from anyone who deals with divination and they will tell you the same. When I finally got all the client cases done for that day, I gathered my cards, put them back in their cases and placed them in their own storage space in my drawer, where I store all other spiritually related items too, like sage, crystals and stones.
Runes, amulets, special magical oils and salves.
Candles and spell items. I was happy that the day had been so productive, and I wished especially that the client with the love-related question had gotten what they asked for, especially when the deck I used was still new to me and I was getting familiar with it. I continued my day normally and went to bed when the day was over, as usual. Next afternoon, while sitting on the sofa, I got an urge to go to a grocery store which is located half a mile from my home. Strange, I thought, because I had no particular need for anything from the store, but I decided to follow this inner calling anyway. If nothing else, I could always stock up on something I will use anyway, and beside that I could get a little walk outside. I got up from the sofa, getting ready to leave when I sat back, this time on the edge of my bed thinking, what should I actually stock from the supermarket? Something big and heavy or something small and easy to carry? Do I need to take a backpack with me, or will just a regular shopping tote bag be sufficient?
Right then I noticed something on the floor.
Underneath the sofa, just at the edge which I can see, only if I sit on my bed on that exact spot where I was sitting. Cards. 2 of them, from the Romance Oracle deck I was using yesterday for the client's reading. Like I said, finding rogue cards which have somehow slipped past me while shuffling is nothing unusual, but these cards weren't normal. Instead of me discovering these rogue cards from their usual spots where they typically fly, these 2 cards were on a spot where cards can't fall. Besides that, they weren't haphazardly spread here and there. No, these were aligned with one another, neatly placed side by side, their picture side upside and all cards in an upright position facing towards me. To add a cherry on the top of this weird thing I was seeing, A sticker of a cat was placed on top of one of the cards. Not any sticker of any cat. This was an image of a cat who was in love. This cute Japanese sticker, which was a leftover from my sticker collection, its paws pressed against its chest, with a small smile and a heart dangling above its head. I couldn't believe my eyes. First of all, I had not noticed missing cards the day before when I used the deck, albeit it was possible I had missed 2 cards and they had fallen while shuffling. When I shuffle decks, the cards fall in front of me, not to my sides. These cards were on the right-hand side where I sit on the sofa while working, and for cards to even fall that far, they would need to fly over the sofa's handrest and then curve back underneath the sofa.
I'd never had any cards fly over the handrest.
Second, these cards were from the romance deck, and the cat sticker was also a love-related sticker. Too suspicious to be a mere coincidence. Third, I had no memory of the last time I had seen that leftover cat sticker. I remember that I sorted that specific sticker box months ago, maybe even last year in November, and since the box contained 5 pieces of each design, I only took 1 of each to my collection and placed the rest in their box.
I have no idea where this sticker came now and how this sticker had actually found its way on top of the cards.
I was so surprised that I actually went for my phone and took a picture of this all before touching the cards. After documenting what I was seeing, I reached for the cards. This was clearly a message for me, even when I had not asked for any messages or signs. This had to be an important one, since there were 2 cards and a sticker placed on one, like emphasizing,
"Hey you!
Pay attention to this." When I reached out for the cards, I realized something shocking. There weren't 2 cards. There were 5. These were not 2 cards, but 2 piles of cards placed so precisely on top of one another that the cards underneath the top cards were not visible.
Absolutely impossible for rogue cards.
Someone had to take my cards, place them in 2 neat piles next to one another with an upright position facing me, snug the cards underneath my sofa at an exact spot which is visible only from one spot from my bed. The spot where I typically sit when getting ready to leave the house. Then look for a sticker, choose a cat in love sticker from my hundreds of leftover stickers to match a romance oracle card deck and put the sticker on top of the cards. I spread the cards on the floor in front of me. It spelled new love, attraction, romantic feelings, honeymoon, release your ex. The 2 cards on top of the piles read, the time has come to clear your energy and enjoy the bliss of holiday time together. The rest 3 cards underneath these 2 said, your feelings are real and worth exploring. You attract romantic love by enjoying this moment fully, and a new person has stirred your romantic feelings. The thing is that I have been single my whole adult life. I have never been married when people of my age are often in their 2nd marriage or have been married at least for once.
I had a boyfriend when I was young, but he was an immature jerk. I have no crush on anyone either, so I took the message as get ready.
Someone's arriving and you'll meet him the easiest by enjoying your life. The past experiences are now past. After I discovered the cards with the sticker from the floor, I never put the cards back in their case with the other cards. They are in a separate space in my drawer. The cat sticker is also a special item for me now. I have saved it, placing it near my home altar to remind me to stay positive and happy. While I consider myself very knowledgeable regarding anything paranormal, I still don't know who sent me this message. I know it must have happened when I slept. And no, I don't sleepwalk, never had, although I apparently mutter in my sleep and toss and turn a lot. But who had their fingers on my cards? If I had to guess, I would point my finger at my belated grandmother from my father's side, but it can as well be my spirit guide Ian.
Someone else from this family line who I don't know, like great-great-great-aunt.
A past life loved one who has not been born but resides in the afterlife as a spirit, or just a spirit passing by. I'm used to getting signs and synchronicity like numbers, items, words, songs, dreams, images, videos, One I got 3 different colored roses lying on a street I have taken the last 10 years without ever seeing any flowers. But this is one-of-a-kind experience. I'm still single a year after receiving this message, so I hope I'm following its guidance right. Next story. Whispers by the Pond. I'm out here in west central Texas, about 4 miles outside a tiny town of maybe 1,000 folks. It's quiet most days, peaceful if you like that sort of thing, but at night it feels like the land has a life of its own. My family's been here for generations, and I grew up knowing the pond was a special place.
Even if I never understood why, if you've ever spent time out in the country at night, you know it ain't really quiet.
It's alive, but not all of it friendly. There's a kind of restless pulse in the dark, something that doesn't come through in city silence. You might hear the wind rustling the trees, frogs croaking, the distant call of a night bird. But there's something else too, something watching, something waiting. My family's land's had its share of strange stories over the years.
Folks seeing things they can't explain, hearing things out in the dark.
Most of those stories cluster around the pond out back. That pond has been here longer than any of us can remember. Tucked in under those tall oaks and ash trees, with that weeping willow we call my lady watching over it all. But until that night, I'd never had my own close-up run-in with whatever lives out there. My great-granddad came over from Ireland, thick accent and all, full of old-world stories and warnings. He believed in spirits tied to the land, some good, some restless, some dangerous.
He used to say, you don't own a place like this.
It owns you, and if you treat it right, it'll watch your back. He told stories about my lady, the willow, like she wasn't just a tree, but a guardian. He said the branches moved sometimes, even when there was no wind, as if she was alive and breathing. He warned us to respect her, and the land around the pond, especially after dark. My grandfather, a practical man in most ways, always swore he never saw a dangerous snake near the pond.
Plenty of spots for him to hide, he'd say, but not here. Maybe the land itself kept them away, or maybe it was just luck.
My grandmother had her own story. One night she arrived home late, the sky black as pitch with no moon, barely able to see her hand in front of her face. She swore she saw a soft blue, glowing ball floating down the path, lighting the way like a lantern. It led her safely to the door, when she jokingly said, "Thank you, dear." She swears she heard a tiny voice whisper back, "You're welcome." She never said if she thought it was a spirit or just her imagination, but we all listened when she told it. That night started like many others. My wife and our 2-year-old daughter had just gone inside to get ready for bed. The day's heat had finally faded, and a cool breeze rustled the trees. I grabbed my pipe and some tobacco, headed out toward the pond. I like to sit there alone sometimes, especially under my lady. The willow's branches hang low, wrapping around an old carved bench, a place my great-granddad carved his initials into the wood long ago.
I figured she was more than just a tree.
Sitting there, blowing smoke rings over the water, I felt connected to something older than me. The light was fading fast, the sky deepening from pinks and purples to deep navy. Crickets started up their nightly chorus. I could smell the earth and damp leaves and a faint hint of something floral, maybe the thorn bushes that grow wild nearby. It was peaceful, too peaceful. I must have nodded off. I woke to a sound, soft, panting, steady, close. Coyote for sure. They're common round here, but they usually keep their distance from a grown man unless they're desperate or rabid.
I didn't move, just listened, heart hammering in my chest. Then came the voice.
A man's voice, low and rough, with a hint of a laugh. It came from where the panting was. "Well, what we got here," he muttered, "nodding off while puffing your pipe, Kutsu Taibo. Now let's see what fun I can have." My heart nearly stopped.
That wasn't right.
Coyotes don't talk like men. Later I learned Kutsu Taibo was an old Comanche insult for a white cowboy like me. At the time, it felt more like a warning than anything else. The footsteps crept closer, each one pressing a little heavier into the stillness. Before I could open my eyes, another voice cut through the dark, this one calm, firm, but warm. It had that same Irish lilt my great-granddad had. "Hold fast, trickster. Long have your folk dwelt these lands, yet this ground is claimed by the folk of my own blood, and I'll not suffer your deceit upon it." Everything went quiet. Even the crickets stopped. Then the coyote's snicker echoed nearby, closer than before, until a sharp crack like a branch snapping and a yelp. I opened my eyes just in time to see a tan shape darting off into the dark pasture. The willow's branches swayed through the night was still, no breeze to move them. Just then I felt my hand get hot, and I woke up with a start. My pipe had burned low and the moon was peeking over the trees. I got up, my legs stiff, and looked across the land. My heart almost stopped. I saw the same tan coyote from my dream staring at me, but the sway of willow branches brought a smile to my lips.
Not sure if that was a dream or real, but regardless, I tipped my hat to the tree. "Good night, my lady," I said, and walked into the house. Next story, it killed my mother.
My name is Naisha. I am a 43-year-old stay-at-home mommy. But before I became a mom, a bunch of odd, creepy and unexplainable things happened to me. Leading up until today, this all started in the summer of 2009. It was a hot, dry, sunny summer day when I rolled over to look at my alarm clock. It said 11:47 a.m. It was my first day off. After a string of 12-hour shifts, 4 nights on in a row, I was the newbie at work, so I had the graveyard shifts that no one else on the team wanted. They said it was too creepy to work alone upstairs of a 2-floor-old hospital, renovated into a nursing home for the elderly or dying. I worked the top floor in the back section with all the special care residences that need constant monitoring overnight. And for the most part, I loved my job. The hours were long, the pay was awesome. The elderly people were kind and chatty, my co-workers were nice. Nothing much to complain about except being tired out all the time due to working night shifts. So yeah, I slept in the very first chance I got. So rolling out of bed at almost noon hour was not uncommon for me. I get a phone call. I pause to check the caller ID on my home phone, and it reads, "Mom." I pick up with phone. Groggy and polite, I answer. "Hello." Right out of the gate, she starts with me. "Why is it almost noon hour, but you sound asleep? What were you doing, partying the night before or something?" in a rude tone.
"No, actually," I replied. "I just worked 4 night shifts back to back because I'm new at work and took whatever shift they threw at me just to get more hours to pay rent. And I was saving up for a car."
I was in the middle of telling her when she cut me off in a rude tone again, saying very loud as if to talk over me, "Well, the reason why I called is to talk to you about a guy friend I was hanging out with for a couple of weeks, and whether or not I was dating him, what was going on and what not. Now mind you, I'm in my 20s at the time, living on my own, no roommates.
No help from parents, nothing. So I was taken back and annoyed by my mother's intrusive comments and questions. I said not that any of this is any of your business and tried to hang up in a positive note.
But she wouldn't have it. We ended up in an argument and I hung up on her, so off I go. With my day off plans, having a nice day, enjoying my time off by the lake with friends, when I get a call on my cell phone from my supervisor in a panic, looking to have someone cover a shift, and they were short extra people. So I agreed to come in as soon as I could. I arrive an hour later and clock in my card in the lunchroom and head upstairs in the elevator. The second the doors close, I hear a voice in my head say a woman's name I knew but did not like very much. It was my new man/friend. I was hanging around for a while now. Well, his ex-girlfriend's mother. I thought, why am I thinking of her at night in an elevator?
Odd. 26 minutes later, when I'm mopping the floors upstairs, I hear my boss get off the elevator,
Walking down the hallway towards me, saying she waited to talk to me about the new woman starting in 45 mins. I will be training her on night shift. I said, "Okay, who?" She replied, "The name of the ex's mother." I stood back for a minute in shock and laughed and said, "Okay."
"Fine." She asked if I was all right. I said, "Yup," and pretended I was fine. I just wanted to get through my night and get it over with.
So a few weeks goes by and I'm dealing with a scheduling issue at work with the staff members in the kitchen area. I was scheduled off for the weekend coming up. I doubled, checked the schedule, wrote it down and left for the day. I was planning on going up to see my mom in town within a day or two of my days off. I get a call at home from my sister telling me mom is sick, was diagnosed with cancer, and was calling everyone home to see her and all the details of her requests and whatnot. I agreed to come the next day. I had some things I had to take care of first. Next day comes, I'm out shopping for groceries, paying bills. When I get an angry call from my supervisor asking me why I'm not at work, blah blah blah. I told her it was my scheduled weekend off, and I checked the schedule, wrote it down, and left for the day. She said my name was wrote in on top of a crossed out name. The name of the ex-girlfriend's mother, yup. She tried to have me fired by pulling this on me when my back was turned. She wanted time off and tried to pull a fast one on me. I was furious and confussed, so in I go to figure this all out. When I arrive at work, it was buzzing like a beehive. Everyone was mad and stressed out. I calmly exhaling myself.
And everything I just learned about my mother and family situation.
The ex-girlfriend's mother goes home, I take the shift over, and the ex-girlfriend's mother goes home and called my sick mother in the hospital to start drama on the phone with my mother. She was right in her hospital bed, sick with cancer. I get a call on the emergency line at work. It's lit up in red like the old Batman phone on the TV show from the 80s. You can't miss it. It's my boss calling to tell me my mother was looking for me at work. Sick, not herself, worried about me, thinking I was in some kind of trouble. She was disoriented from the meds they had her on, so she was hard to talk to. Once she realized I was fine and it was my co-worker stirring up drama, she blamed me and cussed me out to the lowest I've ever felt in my life. I broke down crying, begging for forgiveness for her pain and suffering. She told me something a mother should never say to their own child. I hate you and you're nothing but a stressful pain in my ass.
I should have drowned you when I had the chance. I was flawed and could not breathe. I fell silent on the phone. Then I heard the dial tone.
She hung up on me. I ran to the bathroom crying so hard I could barely see the floor under my feet. Slamming the door behind me, gasping for air, hot tears running down my face. I finished my shift, went home, defeated and depressed. I get home and quickly fall asleep. Exhausted, I dream of a dark, tall figure. That seems to be a man wearing a top hat, but only a silhouette of a man telling me he will not let this go unpunished. Scared, and in a ball of sweat, I wake up to a call from my dad telling me to get to the hospital. Mum was scheduled for a leg X-ray picture to see why all the fluid build-up was about in her right leg. Then Mum turned greenish-grey and is now taking a drastic turn for the worst. To get to the hospital as soon as I can, I was upset and confused she was getting treatments and was given 6 months to live. The last time I saw her, she was looking good despite the lung cancer. Why was this happening so fast? Shocked and in fear, I get over there and I had no time to say goodbye or anything. Bam, she was on life support, and 3 days after that they unhooked her from life support and she died 15 mins afterwards.
I was at her bedside when it happened. I was devastated and grief-stricken. I left the hospital and went home.
I took off 6 months for leave from work and tried to heal myself from this traumatic series of events the best way I could. On returning back to work, I found out the nurses who liked me at work found out about the phone call to my mother bedside in the hospital and chased off the ex-girlfriend's mother, the troublemaker staff member, off. Before I came back, saying she has a bad vibe about her, and residents were complaining about her to the boss. Want to know something kind of creepy? 3 years after she tried to mess with me, she gets married to my now husband's uncle, and her new husband gets diagnosed with cancer soon afterwards. She spends a year by his side while he was recovering from the whole ordeal. Can't say I'm shocked at this point, and I no longer work there, but can't help but wonder who or what was talking to me. And why did it kill my mother and try to take out her new man? Yes, she was not the nicest to me. I felt sad, scared, but slightly thankful towards this spirit looking over me and taking anyone out who wrongs me in the process. Next story. The person or persons on the road in the woods. I'm not sure if that story fits here, but it doesn't hurt to share. To start off, my family from my mother's side have had strange encounters with spirits or supernatural.
I remember stories my mother had told me of her past.
When she walked around in Forest Town and she felt like someone or something was walking with her behind her.
My mother started talking to it and said, "Wouldn't you want to walk next to me, not behind me?"
She felt that the spirit came next to her. And when she reached her home, Kate, the feeling of something walking next to her vanished. She even healed her family members. Mother's aunt had some similar encounters, but that's not the story I'm here to tell. Maybe this story is my encounter with the supernatural. I, from time to time, still think about the events I'm about to tell. So I'll say I am a 24-year-old man and this story happened around 2021-22 when I was 21-22. I'm from Estonia and that's where the story takes place. I believe in supernatural and scary things interest me. On a spring day I went for a walk in the town forest area. The sky was partly cloudy and a little windy. I was planning to walk on a car road with forest on both sides, till comes a bath into forest. I was wearing my headphones listening to music, and I saw a person dressed in all black walking ahead of me about 20-30 odd. I turned my eyes away from them for like 5 seconds to check my phone, and when I raised my head, the person was gone. The road didn't turn suddenly that I couldn't see them, but I thought maybe the person went on the same forest path that I was planning to take.
So I kept walking.
But when I made it to the place where I saw the person, I realized that the forest path wasn't near there. I shrugged it off and continued my walk. But on the forest path, I kept looking over my shoulder, thinking maybe they're following me. The same year in winter, I was walking on the same road.
I had already forgotten about the person I saw when there it was again.
A person in all black walking ahead of me at the same place. For some reason, I checked my phone again. But when I looked at the person, I saw now 2 of them. The other person was walking maybe 5 meters ahead of the other person, and also in all black, but shorter.
That's when I remembered what happened in spring.
I lowered my eyes in front of my feet, and looking back, they were gone. I walked to the path entrance and continued my walk. A few weeks later, I was walking on the road again.
I made it to the point where I saw those people. I realized that I was now dressed in all black.
I looked behind me, but nothing. The thought that ran through my head was, did I see my future self walking here in spring times? But what about the other time then? I've never seen anything like that again. I've told this story to few of my family members and friends. They all say it's interesting, but I feel like they don't believe me. Look from their eyes made it seem like a parent looking at a child telling their story. But I know what I saw. Has anyone ever experienced something like that as well?
Do you believe me?
Next story, Feast of Shadows, the Endless Hunger. I still hear it sometimes in the dead hours when the world is silent and my blood feels too thick to flow right. It's that wet, ragged breathing, the kind that slithers just beyond the edge of my sanity.
I thought I was done with it. I thought burning the house down erased everything.
But some things don't die easy. It started last October, the night the storm hit. I was alone in that crumbling farmhouse on the edge of nowhere, the one nobody wanted. I figured it'd be a quiet night, just me, the rain hammering the roof, and the old dog curled up at my feet. But then I heard the scratching. It wasn't the wind or the branches. This was deliberate. Slow, scraping claws gouging at the walls like some animal trying to claw its way into my soul. I grabbed the flashlight, hands trembling, and crept down the hallway. The beam caught something wet, smeared across the peeling wallpaper, thick, dark red, fresh. A stench hit me then, coppery, metallic, like blood mixed with decay. The door at the end of the hall was cracked open, and behind it,
I saw it, a figure hunched and twitching like it was stitched together from nightmares.
Its skin was patchy, half rotted, half raw flesh peeling away like burnt paper. Glowing yellow eyes stared at me, dripping thick. Black saliva from a cracked maw lined with jagged teeth.
Stained with what I can only assume was the last thing it ate before I could scream. It lunged. I barely dodged as its claws tore into the wooden doorframe, splinters flying like shrapnel.
I slammed the door shut, locking it with shaking hands. Heart pounding so loud I thought it would explode, but it didn't stop. The walls started bleeding. I swear to God, the house itself became a living nightmare. From the cracks in the plaster, veins of blood crawled, pulsing like the house had a heart, one that beat for something terrible inside. I ran upstairs, feet pounding on splintered steps, but the creature followed, its growls filling the air, thick and wet. I tripped in the hallway, falling face first into a pool of sticky, warm blood that tasted like rust on my tongue. When I looked up,
I saw it dragging something behind it, human limbs mangled and dripping.
twisted in unnatural angles. That was the last straw. I grabbed the old can of gasoline in the kitchen and poured it over everything, the floors, the walls, the furniture soaked in blood.
I lit the match and ran, the flames roaring like the screams inside my head. The house burned, but I swear,
Some part of it screamed with me. Now I'm here, months later, in a place that should be safe. But at night, when the shadows fall just right, I hear it again. The wet breathing, the dragging claws, it's coming back. And I'm not sure I'm ready for what it wants next. The fire didn't kill it.
nothing could.
I watched from the cracked window as the flames devoured every corner of that cursed house. But deep beneath the burning wreckage, something stirred. The ground trembled, and with a sickening squelch, the earth tore open, oozing thick, black sludge that reeked of death and rot. From that abyss the thing emerged, twisted and grotesque, its flesh hanging in jagged strips, exposed muscle twitching like a nightmare made flesh. Its eyes glowed brighter, burning with hunger and madness as it howled a guttural roar that shattered the night's silence.
I tried to run, but my legs were rooted, frozen by the raw terror burning through my veins.
The thing lunged, ripping my throat open with claws sharper than razors, blood spattering in hot, thick spurts across my face. I tasted my own death, warm, metallic, and so final, as it dragged me screaming back into the pit of darkness beneath the ruins. There was no mercy in those eyes.
Only a sick pleasure as it feasted, tearing through my flesh with savage delight.
My ribs cracked like dry twigs beneath its crushing grip, and the monster's breath was fetid, mixed with the stench of 1,000 decayed corpses. I felt my life seep out in slow, agonizing waves as it tore my limbs apart, savoring every bite like a feast from hell. The floor beneath us pulsed with a heartbeat not my own, the walls bleeding anew, as if the house itself was crying out in torment. My screams echoed endlessly, swallowed only by the wet, hungry gurgles of the beast's feast. Darkness clawed at the edges of my vision, but I could still hear it whisper, mocking, promising there was no escape. In my final moments, the monster's face hovered inches from mine, its crooked teeth dripping with my blood, eyes shining with triumph. It had won. It had consumed me whole, body and soul, and nothing would stop it now. Now I'm trapped in that endless black pit, a carcass swallowed by the abyss, and the monster roams free. It drags more souls into its hellish domain every night, feeding its insatiable hunger with screams and shredded bodies. The world outside thinks the nightmare ended with the fire, but the truth is buried beneath the ash, growing stronger in the dark. The monster waits, always hungry, its terrible breath a constant reminder that no one is safe. Not in that forgotten town, not anywhere. I am its warning, a ghost in the void, watching as it hunts the living with the same brutal hunger that ended me.
If you hear the scratching, if you smell the copper in the air, run.
Don't look back.
Because whatever you do, don't let it catch you. It's already too late for me. For you.
Maybe it already is too late. The monster's grip tightened around my throat like iron bands, squeezing the air from my lungs until every breath was a desperate gasp.
I clawed at its slimy, decaying flesh, nails ripping and breaking, but it was useless. Its strength was unnatural, a grotesque force of death itself.
Its jagged teeth sank into my shoulder with a sickening crunch, tearing through muscle and bone, the hot, burning pain igniting a primal scream from deep inside me. Blood gushed freely, hot and heavy, soaking my shirt and pooling beneath me like a crimson lake. My vision blurred, shadows swirling into darkness as the monster dragged me deeper into the bowels of that cursed earth where no light dared to follow. I tried to scream, to beg, to fight for the faintest hope of survival, but the sound was choked to a strangled whisper. The last thing I felt was the cold, wet press of its tongue licking the blood from my broken skin before it sank its teeth deep into my neck, shattering my spine with a sickening snap. My body went limp, lifeless, and the monster devoured the final flicker of my soul, leaving nothing but silence and horror in its wake. Next story. Mysteries of Snake Mountain. When I was 18 years old, I went on an end-of-summer trip with my family and my boyfriend. It was an extended weekend trip. We went up to the mountains of North Carolina. We left our house Wednesday afternoon. It was about a 7-hour drive from our house on the coast. We were renting an Airbnb for the weekend. We got there pretty late Wednesday evening, so we all went to bed when we got there. Note, it was just me, my parents, and my younger brother. My boyfriend was coming down Thursday night. We got up the next morning, ready to do some hiking. We ate breakfast, and then we went driving around looking for hiking trails. We found a couple of beautiful trails throughout the day. While we were looking for our last trail of the day, we were driving up a curvy road leading up the side of Snake Mountain. There was a couple of houses on the way up to the top, but other than that, it was just the thick forest. When we got close to the top, there was a huge open field that was at least a mile in diameter. There were no trees, just grass that was maybe knee-height. The little gravel road cut right through the middle of the field. There was wire fences on either side of the road, about 15 feet from the road. I made a mental note about that it would be a good spot to go stargazing. We found out trailhead and finished our hiking for the day. We went back to the rental and had dinner. My boyfriend Elle got there just in time for s'mores. We played some card games and had a good time before bed. The next day we woke up and went hiking at Grandfather Mountain. For those of you who aren't familiar, this is a pretty extensive day trail. It took us nearly all day. By the time we got back to the car, we were all ready to go back to the house and eat dinner. When we were finished with dinner, Elle and I were talking about going stargazing at the spot I'd been to the day before. My parents weren't thrilled about the idea of us going to out there by ourselves, but they eventually relented. So we packed up a bunch of pillows and blankets into the back of Elle's Tacoma, and we were off. It took us about 20 minutes to reach the top of Snake Mountain. By the time we got there, the sun had fully set and the stars were out in full view. We followed the road into the middle of the clearing and backed off the road, closed the fence. We made a makeshift pillow bed in the back of the truck. Elle had a spotlight that he would use to scan the field, occasionally looking for any wildlife that might be out. We were laying out for about an hour, watching the stars. We saw 3 shooting stars in that time. We spent the time talking and having a good time. The conversation had died down and was sitting in comfortable quiet. I would like to add that I grew up on a large farm in Nebraska, and Elle is a hunter, so we are not strangers to the outdoors. As we were sitting in the quiet, all of the noises from the insects stopped. I remember thinking that it was odd, but tried to push it off. A few minutes passed, and I was getting exceedingly more unsettled.
Over my heart, pounding in my ears, there was a crunch.
Like something big had taken a single step onto the gravel in front of the truck. A couple of seconds later, there was another crunch and another pause. There was another crunch.
I said, Elle, as he stood up with the flashlight. As he was standing up, there was a fast crunch, 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 as if it were coming toward us. I stood up a second later and there was nothing there.
With the flashlight, Elle scanned the edge of the road of anything that would explain what was making the footsteps. We both stood there for a minute scanning the field and the edge of the road, but there was nothing out there, no movement or anything.
Where we were, you could see a good half mile in either direction. We would have been able to see if someone was walking.
We were both very ready to go at that point. We shoved the pillows and blankets into the cack of the truck and started down the road. I don't think either of us said a single word till we got back to town. It sounded like whatever it was staling up to us. When we got back to the house, we told my family what happened, and I think my younger brother was the only one who believed us. It's safe to say that we didn't go out stargazing the next night. In fact, we stayed in playing card games. To this day, haven't experienced anything like that. Next story, my haunted workplace. Just to start off, I'm a 27-year-old male, and I do very much believe in the supernatural, despite never having an encounter until now. This happened, no joke, on Halloween in 2023. Yeah, I know it sounds like a cliché horror movie plot, since the boundaries between the worlds become weak on that day, but I know what I heard. Trust my co-workers. For context, we work at a therapy center for children with autism. Since I work with kids, most of them had the day off except for me and two of my other co-workers. I'll refer to the one as Cindy and the other as Emily. So my kid came in around 10 a.m. He'll be called James for this story. Emily left at around 12 p.m. since that's when her kid leaves, so it's just me.
Cindy, James and the kid she worked with, who I'll call Molly. So?
Work is as normal for about 3 hours, then around 2, Taylor Cindy comes looking for me, and she's confused. She says she thought she heard an old woman's voice, and since James is occasionally picked up by his grandma, she thought that she was there. He wasn't supposed to be picked up until around 4 that day, and I told her that. However, that reminded me of the other child I worked with. This client, who I'll call Daphne, is 15 years old, making her a bit of an outlier. For context, James was 4 and Molly was 3 at this point, which is the majority age of most of these kids. Also, her sessions ended around 7:15 p.m, although the center usually closed at 6:30 p.m, so definitely an outlier. And it was usually just me and her for an hour and 15 minutes since Molly and any other kids left around.
5 hours or 6 p.m. Now, to be fair, we had like 4 employees.
And I was the only one available at this late hour, so don't make any assumptions that I did anything improper. Whenever she'd use the restroom by herself, I'd always hear a woman's voice. I asked a few times if she was talking to someone or on the phone because it would stop when she was done, but she always denied it, and I doubt she'd lie to me. Anyway, I just accepted it as a fact of life and assumed it was likely from the back of the building since it's near some apartments. However, the apartments are kitty corner, diagonally connected by corners, to each other, and the building I'm in was split in half, and I was not in the kitty corner half whenever I heard this voice. Also, the apartment was on a higher floor. The actual structure was a State Farm office, but I think Jake hasn't been there for a while. What I mean is it was abandoned, and actually there may have been a for lease sign, but the logo was still there. There's a chained-in area behind my work, but there's also a secondary room between the main room and the back. So I don't think that's possible, and it's a chained-in area with nothing of note, so I can't imagine anyone
hanging out there unless they wanted to rifle
through our garbage, which is often filled with diapers and food wrappers. This all just establishes that there was no other rational explanation for these noises I was hearing. So no one else had ever mentioned it until that day. As I said, it was just the 4 of us that day, and the 2 kids are effectively non-verbal, and I wasn't doing a Meryl Streep impression, so that explanation was out. So I jokingly said it must be a ghost. Now, before I get to why she didn't laugh, more of my co-workers have had experiences of unexplained voices. Another girl, who I'll call Eliza, eventually took over Daphne from me at the request of the parents, and she heard voices too. Same with Michelle and Sandra. Yes, I worked with all women, and it always happened when they were closing up and alone with one child. So Halloween was the only time when this had happened with more than 2 people. Now, as to why she didn't laugh despite the perfect timing. Cindy has lived in this town her whole life, and apparently about 15 years earlier, this place was a daycare, and a woman who worked there died after being hit by a train on the tracks right next to the building. I also learned that for unexplained reasons, the place had shut down after a few months, after 2 times they tried to restart a similar business there. I looked it up because it was unbelievable, but it was true. Mother of 5 killed by a train right in front of her husband, and she worked at the same building, albeit under different management. So, is she watching over us to make sure we're doing right by the kids we work with? I hope she's pleased. Next story. The thing in the woods is back. I don't know how to start this. I guess it's important to note I'm not a stranger to the supernatural. I've been dealing with spiritual beings and all kinds of stuff of the sort. Nothing has ever been like this creature. About 1 year ago, it started normally enough. With a few times I had a feeling of being watched, but never anything too serious. Another important detail is that I live in an area where there's a lot of old people surrounded by woods and farmland. Where I live, it's in a hill with 3 main roads, and the edges are forest at the top. 2 corners of the property that have trails into the woods. I don't go back there because it's all private property for hunting.
I always had a weird feeling. Near the top of one of the many hills, they were more of very steep roads that went up at a really bad incline. There was a point where I had my friend over for weeks at a time, I'll call him Jay, as to not disclose his name. He was curious about some supernatural things I told him about skinwalkers. And the name we don't speak, obviously I didn't say the name because we were right beside the long forest that followed that hill the entire way.
He asked why you could say it. He said the name. Normally I wouldn't think anything weird, but I had an awful feeling, and we kept walking. This is where I think it first started, the whole situation. Around 3 days later is when I had my first actual encounter with the creator. I walked around in the early mornings, when it just starts becoming blue and it's still foggy and quite to a degree, and the air is still cold and wet. I'm walking up this turn down the hill when I notice it completely. I look at the trees because I find it calming. I also scan for any animals because it's silent, or even crickets are making sounds. I feel like I'm being watched from
every direction. When I see a tree I've never noticed before. As I said, I love looking at the trees, so I have mental note for where the first few are.
When I see it, it doesn't peek or look behind anything. It looked like it was the tree. I don't understand what it could have been doing, but it clearly wasn't a tree. It was dark. I couldn't see. It's skin only that it was there. I've heard many stories of that creature, but not of it being an object. I walked home pretending I didn't notice anything. I felt it following. I could hear it. I didn't look back till I got to my porch. It was gone, just left, with that feeling of fear and those eyes. I could still feel those eyes on me. That night, I couldn't stop hearing a tapping at my window. I eventually fell asleep. I never told my parents about it, not for fear they wouldn't believe me, but so they didn't think there was a bear or something and keep me inside.
I really loved walking and kept doing it without incident for several weeks. Then one day I was walking. I hit the middle road out of the 3 main ones. I thought it would be safer. Still thinking about that thing. It was dark. I was walking home after going around. I felt those eyes again. I could hear it getting behind things hiding. I could see its shadow from behind my cousin's house that is right below mine. It was big, about 9 feet tall to 15 feet. Its shadow was sticking out from the house. I kept walking and felt so unsafe. It
followed through a long alley separating my house, and there's a big ditch. It followed me. I turned back and ran as fast as I could. I heard its quite calculated steps, I'm guessing. The only reason it was so loud because I heard them more clear. It was still ducking behind things while I ran. It followed till I saw it creep behind a house and I rushed into my house. I heard that same taping for a few hours before it stopped. I eventually started walking again and didn't have any incidents. For about 3 months I was playing video games, as I play a lot. I can't remember what, but probably a Dark Souls game. When I heard that tapping again, it would tap and pause for a few seconds and tap again. That's not what scared me the most. Though I looked at the window to see that it was looking at me with these bottomless eyes, I would say it had none but. It was like shadows I got in my bed and could still see them. I was terrified. I got on my phone and called my friend and tell him about it. He was telling me about possible things it could be, which didn't help. It did that again once after that.
Night, I can't forget that light, tall, skinny frame with those cold, bottomless eyes just watching with so much hate. I haven't had any experience recently, but I've been feeling watched again. My girlfriend had a dream today. She woke up terrified. She begged me not to go camping or riding around for a while. She was so worried about me being around those woods.
She said that the creature was chasing me and that we were on the phone and that I was crying, begging her to call 911 and that I was scared that it was following me. She said she saw through my eyes that it was in the trees. I didn't notice it, but she did. Then it went dark and silent and she woke up. I wouldn't be concerned usually, but last night I could have sworn I was being watched before I fell asleep by those same eyes waiting, watching, hoping I slip up. I hope that it isn't what I believe, because if so, I don't know if I'll be all right.